book lovers, it is G-Swizz here, and I'm here today with my October/Extra Charms wrap-up. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to everybody for supporting me and helping me reach milestones and wishing me a happy birthday, and also having a great reception to my recent video. It was a roller coaster of a month, but I do have to say overall the positivity definitely outweighed the negativity. I was just not anticipating it to be such an insane month. It was definitely a roller coaster I never really anticipated. I would have to say it was kind of a life-changing month in that it was a month that I reached milestones. It was a month that I really pushed myself to do more, to be more. One of the best months I've had in regards to content, as well as just one of the best months in life in general, and I just want to thank every single one of you guys for supporting me even through the tough times. Like, even as I say this, there were a lot of tough times this month, and I thank you guys for staying consistent with me. I'm saying this in all seriousness. I seriously could not have made it here without all of you guys supporting me constantly. I love you guys. I really do. And yeah, I mean, this is meant to be like a wrap-up video, so I guess I will get on to wrapping up the books that I read this month, but I just want you guys to know that I appreciate you guys so much, and the things that happened this month impacted me in a lot of positive and negative ways, but like I said, the positivity outweighs the negativity. If you guys were wondering, I read 12 books this month. I am still really bad at updating my Goodreads. I seriously used to be so excited about Goodreads. Every single time I finish a book, I'm like, yes, I gotta add that to my Goodreads challenge. I don't know, I think it's because I finished my Goodreads reading goal for the year. I've just been slacking off when it comes to Goodreads. It doesn't make too much of a difference to me at the moment, and I need to fix that because Goodreads used to make me really excited about reading. And yes, I have been pretty excited about reading, but not as excited about reading as if I was constantly on Goodreads. I've been filming and editing these wrap-ups before I even update my Goodreads. That needs to change because recording these things on Goodreads kind of helps me form more coherent thoughts, so I might not be producing anything of substance at the moment. Hopefully I come out as somewhat coherent. Without further ado, I'm gonna get started with what I put on my Extra Charms TBR and what I accomplished during that week. It was just completely last minute. I just decided to start my Charms TBR. As soon as the readathon started, I'm like, you know what? I want to participate in the Owls next year, so I might as well get a head start and do some Extra Charms. Because as of the moment, it's best your girl gets on that. I'm gonna get started with the prompts of the Extra Charms, and I will be wrapping up the book that corresponded to that prompt. Prompt number 1 for Charms Extra credit was Aloha Moron. And for this one, you had to read a book that was first in a series. It's so funny because in total, I read 6 first books in a series this month. I could have used this for anyone, but I decided for this one, I was gonna go with Nevermoor, The Trials of Morgan Crow by Jessica Townsend. I finally read this book, guys, and I'm so happy I finally read this. I also got the Australian hardback. It's so weird to call this the Australian hardback because Australian hardbacks like literally never happen, but it happened with this series because this series is doing very successfully. I met Jessica Townsend yesterday for the second time, actually. Yeah, so I met her for the first time a year ago when Nevermoor was getting praise, but not as much praise because it was a debut. But yesterday, like, the queue was huge. Like, they had to hold her book signing at a shopping mall. The shopping mall was just packed and packed with so many people waiting to meet Jessica Townsend, and you know what? She's made it. She signed my book, and it says "Step Boldly" in here from Jessica, and I also have Wondersmith signed because Wondersmith, as I'm filming this video, came out yesterday. Somebody at the shopping mall while I was in the signing line, like, that worked like in the shopping mall, I think they worked at a jewelry store, and it was really cool. They were asking myself and my friend what this book series was about and if their kid would like it, and we pretty much pitched it to them. They ended up purchasing the first 2 books, and I stood in line for them to get their son's book signed as well, and it was just the greatest thing ever. Dimmicks, where's my job? Honestly, I had to pitch that book to that woman. This is what I do for a living. Not really for a living, but I don't want to do it for a living. I want to promote books for a living because that would just be awesome. But anyway, enough with the salt, G-Swizz. Let's get back to talking about Nevermoor. This book was definitely worth the hype. Now, a lot of people, including the publishing company, do use the next Harry Potter as a pitch for this book, and while I somewhat disagree with that statement, I somewhat agree as well. It made me feel like I was experiencing a series like Harry Potter for the very first time because it was written in such a way that it was very magical but very easy for a child to get into. And I feel like the world building in this first book had a very similar gradual pacing leading to the Philosopher's Stone. That's just my personal opinion. That's how I see the parallels. But other than that, this is kind of nothing like it. And you know what? I appreciated its difference, but at the same time, I definitely think that HP lovers would definitely love this book, and I 100% think that this is a great series for a new generation of readers. For that, I gave this book, I don't even remember, like, you know what? I didn't rate it on Goodreads. On Goodreads, it still says I'm currently reading this, so I need to give this a rating. I would say a 4.5 out of 5 stars. And I'm seriously so excited to see where Wondersmith takes us. Oh man, I'm so proud of Jessica Townsend. But yes, so this was the first book that completed my CHARMS wrap-up. Option number 2 for CHARMS extra credit was Accio. And for this one, you gotta read a book that was at the top of your TBR. And a book that was at the top of my TBR at the time that I read it was These Rebel Waves by Sarah Rush. I've never read a book by Sarah Rush until I read this. I don't know why, I just felt like I was craving a new release. That's why it was at the top of my TBR. I don't know, like it wasn't really that intriguing to me. Like it had to do with Pirates and Magic because, you know, that was the YA Chronicles theme of the month. I just figured, hey, it's a new release, I may as well give this offer a chance because I feel like doing that. I felt like having something fresh. And while this wasn't really my favorite read of the month, I did still really enjoy myself, and I still found myself to be very fascinated. I felt like it had a lot of historical influences when I was reading it, and I'm not a big fan of historical fiction, but obviously this is more fantasy than anything because it does contain pirates and magic. There's a lot of religion in this book, and I found that to be very fascinating. I seriously don't remember the last time I read a fantasy that had a lot of religious influences in it. This made me feel like I was taking church history as a class again. Back when I was in college, I took church history as a class, and it was very interesting to kind of like read this and see the influences, the parallels between church history and this book. I felt like I was being transported back to 2014 or 2015 when I took that as a subject back in college. It just felt so weird. But at the same time, pirate shenanigans ensued, and so was their magic. And there was a crocodile in this. Wait, was it a crocodile or was it an alligator? I don't know, but it scared the heck out of me. I was like, ah, what is gonna happen to these characters? I don't know. I gave this one a 3.75 out of 5 stars. I pretty much did enjoy the story for the most part, and I found it very fascinating, but I wasn't really attached or really engaged. And so yeah, 3.75 out of 5 stars. I am definitely looking forward to continuing on with the series, and I am also looking forward to reading Sarah Rush's other trilogy. Prompt number 3 for CHARMS extra credit was Incendio, or Incendio, one of the two. I'm really bad at my pronunciation, as you can tell. And for this one, you had to read a book with words fire or flame in the title / series name, or a book with a flame picture on the cover. I read the Uncanny Inhumans Volume 1 Time Crush. As you can see, the Human Torch is on the cover, so it counts. I read this and it was very interesting. It has been a long time since I had read anything to do with the Inhumans, or I watched anything to do with the Inhumans. I either see them on Marvel cartoons, or I watched the really interestingly bad TV show on them. Let's not talk about that. That's probably the only Marvel show that definitely deserved to be cancelled. Oh my goodness, R.I.P. Luke Cage and Iron Fist. I'm getting sidetracked, as you can tell. I read this month and I was very fascinated by how different things were. Like how many things happened before this to lead up to the ramifications that occurred in here. I don't want to spoil anything. I don't want to say anything in case people are reading the Inhumans. So let's just say that there's a power couple in the Inhumans, and there was a lot of conflict between this power couple, and it was conflict that I never really anticipated. That's all I'm gonna say. Although I did find it very interesting, I didn't love it as much as I wanted to love it, but it was so good to revisit the Inhumans after not seeing them for a while, after not reading about them for a while. Solid 3 out of 5 stars. I liked the story, but I didn't really enjoy myself reading the story. I found it very fascinating. I think I mostly liked this because I was just excited to read about these characters again. But the story wasn't that strong. I don't know if I'm gonna actually continue on with the series. It was an achievement. It completed a prompt. Prompt number 4 is Rictus Emperor. Again, I'm really bad at my pronunciation. A book that tickles you the right way, whether it be an exciting trope, a theme, or a genre. You guys all know that I am trash for anything to do with superheroes. I figured for this prompt, it was about time that I reread a favorite. And that, my friends, was Renegades by Marissa Meyer. I am so happy I reread this. And yes, if you're wondering, I am Nodrian trash. I will go down with a ship. There's so many things about this book that I finally remember about it. And it's so funny because for the most part, I didn't remember that much about it. Over time, I started to really root for the Renegades. I don't know where I stand. I'm on Team Nova for the most part, but then I'm also on Team Adrian for the most part. I love both of them as characters, and it is so funny and so interesting that both Team Renegades and Team Anarchist really do have flaws in them. That is what I find very fascinating about this book. The way that I would pitch this book to anybody is imagine if superheroes ruled the government. And it's very funny because you get those thought-provoking movies like Captain America Civil War where the government runs the government and you think that superheroes should rule the government because the government in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is trying to interfere with the missions of the Avengers, and those who don't sign the accords are off the team pretty much. You can see where they're coming from, but at the same time they can come off as really annoying and you're like,
why can't the superheroes do what they can without the government's on their back?
But imagine if they didn't live in that world where the superheroes had actually won the battle and years later superheroes are running the government. You'd think the world would be a utopia and everything would be perfect, but this really broadens your perspective. It broadened my perspective for sure. To actually look at it from that lens and realize, wow, okay, even though that happened, corruption in this world is possible. It honestly does baffle me because I'm obsessed with reading about vigilantes and villains. Reading about a world that I would think that is perfect actually be flawed to widen my perspective. I really love this book series, not just because Marissa Meyer wrote it. I do love Marissa Meyer. I love her for writing the Lunar Chronicles. I also love her for writing Renegades. Yes, there is the debate whether the Lunar Chronicles or Renegades is better, and I honestly cannot decide. I personally love the way that she wrote the Lunar Chronicles better because the pacing was definitely better. Whereas with Renegades, I kind of like the genre, the aspects, the concept better. In this book, I have an attachment to Nova and I have attachment to Adrian, and I do like the other characters, but I'm not as attached to them as I am with the full squad in the Lunar Chronicles, if that makes sense. I hold both series so high in my head, but I can't decide which one I like better. I give this book a 5 out of 5 stars. I'm really excited to read Arch Enemies. And the final CHARMS extra credit prompt that I completed this month, which was the final prompt that was given, was Lumos. And this one, you gotta talk about a book with a light cover. And I do have to say that this book does technically have a light cover for the most part. Vicious by Victoria Schwab. This is the UK edition. If this was the US edition, this wouldn't really count because the US edition is red. I've actually read this book twice. I didn't want to include it in my September wrap-up. I actually started and finished it before I went to VidCon. I enjoyed it at the time, but I forgot almost everything about it because I had read it just before VidCon. I think that was kind of a mistake because there was so much on my mind. I actually read it at a time that I was packing for VidCon Australia. My mind was just so absent because I was constantly thinking about what I was meant to take to VidCon, plans for VidCon, and then when I came back from VidCon, I had forgot almost everything about this book. And so I had to stop and I had to reread this book. And it's totally fine, you know what? Because I had reached all my Goodreads goals, I am fine with reading a book for the second time in a year. I think once I came to that realization that I allowed myself to do that for the very first time this year, it really freed me. Another example I would use for this at the beginning of the year was Lifelike. I had read Lifelike and I was not engaged whatsoever. I totally got everything about Lifelike, didn't care at all. And I had read it so fast and I had just been so distracted and so absent-minded while reading Lifelike. It was the Biblio Squad book pick of the month. So I had to do something about that. I wanted to discuss it with the squad, so I reread it. I now really love Lifelike and I cannot wait for the sequel. Sometimes you just gotta allow yourself to reread those books, even if it is for the second time in a year, and if it doesn't count as a never book in your Goodreads challenge. Sometimes you just gotta stop and remember that you wanted to enjoy the book, and if you felt absent-minded and if you don't remember anything about the book, if you feel like it is right to revisit it, then it's okay. You can reread it. And coming to that realization really did free me personally. So I'm so happy I did that with Vicious because I ended up really enjoying myself reading this, and I kind of wish that I read this earlier on in the game. I kind of personally wish I read this before I read A Darker Shade of Magic because I wanted to read this before A Darker Shade of Magic and I was kind of expecting to like it more than A Darker Shade of Magic. Personally, I didn't, and that's totally fine because A Darker Shade of Magic is one of my favorite series of all time. That being said, I did like this better than the Monsters of Verity duology. I loved this book so much. I think I loved it especially because I love vigilantes and villains, and hello, this book is all about that. I liked it a lot, and I think that's why I really did enjoy this book, and I think that's why I expected to like it more than I liked A Darker Shade of Magic, but turns out I liked A Darker Shade of Magic more. I gave this book a solid 4.25 out of 5 stars. Really did enjoy this book, and I'm so happy I reread it, and I'm definitely looking forward to continuing on to Vengeful. And then of course we move on to the rest of the books that I read in the month of October. The very first book that I completed this month, actually I don't remember whether I completed it this month or I completed it last month. I had to make sure I completed it before the Never release came out this month. That new release came out like the day after October started, so I needed to jump on that. So yeah, the first book I completed before anything else was an absolutely remarkable thing by Hank Green. I have filmed a spoiler-free review for this, and I don't want to say too much about it because you know, like I've already made a spoiler-free review on this. I've definitely filmed it. All I have to say about this book right now is that it was an absolutely remarkable book. I loved it. It was worth the hype that it got and so much more. I don't even think the author is gonna see this because he's just so successful. But Hank, you are the best, and I am so thankful you wrote this book. And yes, of course, we move on to the next book, and I know that a lot of you guys are gonna know which one I'm talking about, and yes, it's The Muse of Nightmares by Lady Taylor. I have colored pages for this one. Hey, if any of you guys have a blue sprayed edged version of like Stranger Dreamer, and if you're looking to give it to somebody, you know, hit a sister up, hit a sister up. Oh man, that's sounded so bad. Hit me up and down. My lordy. It was a good conclusion. I love Laini Taylor. I love these characters. I love this world. It went in places that I didn't anticipate it to go. I don't know whether I like Stranger Dreamer or The Muse of Nightmares better. I personally cannot decide between the two, and I don't want to talk about this book in depth because I don't want to spoil anything whatsoever, because this is a sequel and the finale to this series. It was beautiful and it was totally worth the 1.5 year wait. I don't think I'd ever be so attached to some characters from a duology ever, but I was very attached to the series as if it was like, what, a 5-book series. That is how much I felt attached to these characters. That is how you know that Laini Taylor is a really good writer. Even though I do usually prefer my books to have a balance, this book series is mostly character driven. I at first didn't know how to feel about that. As soon as I started reading Stranger Dreamer, I was immediately hooked. I was afraid that I was going to lose interest very easily. No, I ended up keeping interest throughout the whole entire book. I don't even have to like really say how much I rated this book. Everybody knows I rated this book 5 out of 5 stars. I didn't even rate it on Goodreads, but it's a 5 out of 5 stars. It totally deserves it. The next book that I completed in the month of October was a book that I've needed to read for a very long time. I'm for sure so satisfied that I had finally buckled down and I read it. And that, my friends, is The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. This is the first book in the guide series. I don't even know what you call it, but they're like companion books. There's Ladies' Guide to Petticoats and Piracy that came out this month. I still haven't read that one because Booktopia, where is my pre-order at? Like I briefly mentioned at the beginning of this video, I'm not the biggest fan of historical fiction. I went into this with a pretty open mind, and while I do have to say that I wasn't fully satisfied with this book because like it was a pretty thick with 2 C's historical fiction, I still really did enjoy a lot of the aspects of it. I did find it very funny, very snarky. I did love the characters in this book. I don't know why I had this all of a sudden connection to these characters, but I do have a connection to these characters, and I personally love Felicity because Felicity and I relate on a spiritual level, but also like the fact that, you know, we're both on the ace spectrum. So I take it to Ladies' Guide for that aspect. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed my time reading it. There were times where I was just not as engaged because it was historical and it was a bit draggy, but I enjoyed it for the most part, and I'm definitely looking forward to continuing on with Ladies' Guide. And the next book that I read in the month of October is a book that I finally read. And that, my friends, is Waking God by Sylvain Neuvel. This is the sequel to Sleeping Giant. This was intense. I do have to say, when you are doing tasks, do not, I repeat, do not listen to the audiobook because it is very intense. I definitely do have to say the audiobook is especially intense when you are out in public and people are going to look at your facial expressions and ask you, are you okay? So I listened to this book on audiobook on public transport. It was such a funny, unique experience. I just felt the intensity of the moment. I really don't want to spoil anything, but this book is really intense. Since this is the second book in the series, I don't want to say too much, but if you guys don't know, if you guys haven't heard about the series before, it's kind of told in mixed media format, mostly interview format, and if you really love the Illuminae files, I think you would definitely like this book. Not really for the aesthetic reasons, but possibly if you've listened to the Illuminae files audiobooks, I think that you would really love the audiobooks for this series because they are just as probably even more intense. I gave this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I was personally actually hoping I would give it 5 out of 5 stars because everybody keeps on saying that this is the best book in the series. I do see how it is better than Sleeping Giants. I am kind of scared about Only Human, but regardless, I'm pretty excited to conclude this series, and I did enjoy this one, but I didn't like this one as much as a lot of people liked it. And the next book that I read / listened to this month is a book that I don't have a physical copy of. Actually, I do have a physical copy of it somewhere. It was like a 50-cent library copy that was just completely completely destroyed. I've actually recently ordered a special edition copy from the Book Depository because I love this book so much. I can't believe I love this book so much because I had mentioned to you guys, historical fiction really does intimidate me, and I'm not usually the biggest fan of historical fiction. And yes, you can guess what book this genre is in. I mean, the genre this book is in. I don't... Words. The book that I'm talking about is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. I finally read The Book Thief. It is the favorite book of many of my favorite people in the entire world. Like, you know, Kaz, if you're watching this, Kathleen, if you're watching this, a lot of you guys, if you are watching this, I know you're proud of me. So I read The Book Thief and it destroyed me. It is totally worth the hype, 100%. I know that a lot of people don't really agree with that statement. It was written so well for any audience, and it was narrated by death. It was such a unique concept, and the execution of that concept was amazing. I might be overhyping this book for a lot of people right now, but this book had perfect execution. It was written so well. You were able to root for every single one of the characters. You have this weird attachment to the narrator for some reason, and you start to sympathize with death at some point, but at the same time you hate death. I can't believe I'm talking about death itself right now. It's just crazy. Marcus Zusak, wow, you beast. I was definitely blown away. It's a 5 out of 5 stars. It is one of my favorite books now, and I totally see why it is the favorite for so many other people. It was definitely a very funny and emotional book to read before I read another emotional book. And I ended up finishing this book on my birthday. So it was a very bittersweet book to finish on my birthday, and that, my friends, is Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J Maas. I don't think that it's fully hit me that this is the end of an era. Thoughts are very incoherent, and I can't talk about this book without spoiling it, so I'm not going to say too much. But if you guys don't know, this is the final book in the Throne of Glass series, the book that we've been waiting years for. The book series that kicked off Sarah J Maas's career has come to a conclusion. It was a very satisfying conclusion. I am so happy that this was not an Aqua War situation where everything was just like war, 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 rush, 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 and that was it. No, this book definitely needed to be thick with 2 C's. I don't know how to function. I feel like I might just need to reread this book before our Biblio Squad live show for it. This is our Biblio Squad book pick of the month for November. If you guys don't know, we haven't made live show announcements at all, so we might be discussing that. I don't know if there's going to be any details in the description of this video, but if there is, then you guys will probably be some of the first to know. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. I was very satisfied with this conclusion. I mean, there were things in here that I wasn't that happy about, like the adulty influences. Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of those scenes, but I love the characters individually. I love them so much. I can't say anything else without spoiling this, so yeah, 5 out of 5 stars for me. It was great. And lastly, the final book that I read in the month of October was The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. And if you guys don't know, this is a book told in verse and poetry. If you guys also don't know, I am a sucker for some modern poetry, so I decided I was going to read this book this month. In all honesty, I was so happy I did. This book was blurbed by Angie Thomas, who, if you guys don't know, I mean, like, how do you not know Angie Thomas? She is the author of The Hate You Give, and that book is amazing. It was amazing, it is amazing, it will forever be amazing. And I do have to say, if you love The Hate You Give, I think you'd love this book. Not necessarily because of the Black Lives Matter movement, because as much as The Hate You Give stands for that, that is not what the book is about entirely. The book has a lot of hip-hop references, as well as The Poet X does. Also, both books have poetic and cultural influences. I appreciate both of them for those aspects. I think that Elizabeth Acevedo did a very good job, and there were also a lot of religious influences in here as well that kind of like really resonated with me and cut deep, but at the same time it really worked well for the story. I have to give a trigger warning for religious abuse. If that is something that triggers you, I would say proceed with caution if you do proceed at all. Even though The Poet X was a pretty hard read to read at times, I still really loved it, I still really enjoyed it, and I definitely do want to read more by Elizabeth Acevedo in the future. Definitely do have to say that this book gets a 4.75 out of 5 stars from me. I am definitely looking forward to reading more from this author in the future. So I guess that is going to be it for this October wrap-up today, book lovers. If you want to purchase any of the books that I read in the month of October, all the Book Depository purchase links will be down in the description, so you can check them out, you can purchase them, and you can help me out by doing so. And I also have social medias. I'm at G-Swizzel Books on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm also at Goodreads. That's www.goodreads.com/gswizzle, and let's hope I actually update my Goodreads this month. I love you, book lovers, and I will see you later. Peace.